Queridas, queridos, welcome back to the BEAM&Flow podcast. I'm your host, Chloe Cofresi. I am a body-led transformation coach, and I help you heal yourself through detoxing your body, unwinding your nervous system, and creating a life that feels like summer camp. And the way that we do that is through your body, energy, awareness, movement, and flow. Your beam and flow, if you will. And I am so excited to welcome you back to season 10 of the podcast. I cannot even believe that it's season 10. So if you are brand new, this is not 10 years of the podcast. It's been about 2 years, 2.5 years, but this is season 10, and the way that the podcast works is that every season, so every solstice and equinox, we release 4 new episodes every season, and every once in a while there's a bonus. So this season, I am so excited to be back. We sort of skipped the spring season this year because I was deep in process work and allowing life to happen. And so I'm really grateful for the space to do that, and I am back and so excited to share all of the lessons that I have learned, and I get to share them with some friends this season. I'm really excited to introduce you to them. So this season is very special. Every episode I will be interviewing a different co-guide from the Rooted Summit, which is an online virtual healing summit that I am co-producing with 4 other amazing guides and practitioners, and our wonderful moderator, Brig. And so this Rooted online summit is being released on June 22nd. All of the workshops are pre-recorded, and you will have access to all of them once you register, and you will have access for life. And I'm going to leave it there because you're going to hear from these amazing guests, and I know you're going to want to sign up. And I'm so excited because you get to do it for free and then have it to work with whenever it works for your schedule. You don't have to show up for anything. It's not anything that you have to be present for at a specific time. It is completely customizable for you. And so without further ado, I would love to welcome this week's guest, Anna Robinson. So how are you today, right now in this moment? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I've been landing, and there's been, aside from the jet lag, just bigger questions and things at play. And so there's a part of me that feels just like a tiny bit distracted by the what's next in this particularly wide open moment of my life. But I'm also feeling just like really grounded in it, and I'm feeling just really delighted by a lot of what's already here. So yeah, just kind of sitting in that soup.
Delight is a wonderful place to be.
So good, Chloe.
Well, as listeners of the pod, especially this season, are aware, this season has been all about me interviewing the wonderful guides of our Rooted container. And we ended up recording in the order that the workshops are listed on our YouTube playlist. So Anna closes out our beautiful Rooted container with a really incredible tea ceremony and journaling practice. And I would really like to take a moment in this conversation, and for those of my audience who have not had the chance yet to sign up for Rooted and see your work, can we talk a little bit about what led you to tea and the magic that it brings to your life, and why it was calling to you to offer that in this container.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. I think it's even important to share that my work is not tea. My work is in for myself and in teaching others how to drop into the space of heart, how to live and lead and be not from the mind, which is what I was taught through most of my life, but from the heart space, which gives us access to our body's wisdom, our soul's wisdom, and greater connection to what I think is the truth of who we are. And tea has been a ritual that has been one of the most supportive tools for me in giving me something concrete that I can show up to that lands me in the heart space and ultimately in the work that I do and that I want to be doing more of. You know, it's easy. We can sit here all day, Chloe, and talk about what it means to be living from the heart. And it's such a unique path for every single human being, because the heart path is a path to listening to your own inner wisdom. And I can't tell you what that is. And so I'm really drawn to spaces that give all of us a direct experience or an opening to the possibility of receiving direct wisdom from our higher self, from these more loving and compassionate ways of understanding ourselves in the world. So that's why I chose to offer tea as a part of the Rooted offering, and why I will continue on a daily basis to sit in ritual with tea and to share it more and more with others. And you know, we did some journal exploration as a part of that session as well. And again, there's so many tools that have really deeply benefited me, and writing is one way that I've gained access to my voice. And so yeah, that's what I'm hoping to share more of. Like, this is what has worked for me to access more of me, and I'm hoping that in sharing those offerings with others, that it also supports them in finding access to more of them and their truth. I can totally say more about how I came to be on that exploration of what it means to live from the heart, because there is a story behind that. But I'm just going to pause here because I could talk for a really long time, and I love your input and reflection.
Well, I definitely want to hear that story. I think that's an important story to share. And with what you've spoken to already, what's really landing with me is the individual journey that we all experience, the individual path that I don't want to say find, I want to say create, because I don't believe that there is one path specifically laid out in one direction that we must find in order to, whatever the wording is we want to use, be in alignment or be living in our heart space, from our heart space. For me, it feels like the path is one that we create, and that we might find different places of building the path, or different places that the path goes through than we thought it might lead us to. And so maybe the next place that's calling out to me in this conversation is, yes, your story. I want to hear the story of what brought you to this. And maybe within that story, if you could speak to ways in which the path has developed in a different way or in a different direction than you maybe originally thought.
Yeah, those two questions go so well hand in hand. So happy to share a little bit about that. And I'll share maybe a shortened version because, again, it can be so easy to go down a much longer road. But if I'm to kind of boil it down, what I would say is I grew up as an atheist. My family was just not, on my dad's side, he just was in a Catholic environment and did not in any way vibe with any of that, the idea of God or the practices that were in place through religion. And on my mom's side, my grandmother is a Holocaust survivor, and there was a real severance for her of any belief or trust in faith or God given her life experiences. And so it actually wasn't even just an absence of spiritual or religious belief and practice in my life. It was an actual aversion to it and a narrative that was very anti all things religion. And my family really prized intellectual achievement and achievement through kind of more traditional success in school and work and all of these things. And I, as a naturally really empathic human, became really, really good at learning the rules of my terrain and doing exactly what I was supposed to do in order to be successful and well liked. And at the time, what I thought would actually lead to a really fulfilling life. Those were kind of the stories that were told to me about how you find happiness. And so when I was about 29 years old, I had really checked majority of the boxes that were kind of part of that curriculum for life success. I was married, we had bought a home, I was in a career that I thought I liked and kind of was gaining in recognition. And I was deeply, deeply unfulfilled. Kind of just to boil it down, I made all the choices I thought I wanted, and I got to a point where I just felt myself hated a 9-to-5 job. I would come home every day and be like, I literally feel like the whole day just sucked part of my soul away. And all I wanted to do was just zone out, watch TV. And then it became this pattern of just like doing it all again every single day. And there was a part of me that just really deeply knew I wanted more. And there was a lot that went into that exploration, like the just acceptance of, wow, I tried so hard to get here and it's not where I want to be. And then also the disappointment of that and the need to open myself to bigger questions. But what ended up happening was I started opening myself to life, basically, with the question of what is my purpose? Kind of in recognition that I was not okay to live this same cycle day in and day out for the rest of my life, that something had to change, and I didn't know what it was. I just started asking that question all the time to the universe, like, what is my purpose? To life, what is my purpose? And I ended up going for a walk and sitting on a bench one day at a park just across the street from my house, and I had this experience of my heart cracking wide open. And as with a lot of these things and sort of what I was speaking to with the heart path, like a lot of these experiences they're so beyond language. And so even when I say that, I really can't do justice to this moment that really changed the trajectory of my life, where I felt for the first time this infinite well of love that was really pouring out of my heart and into the world and through every cell of my body, and this like aliveness that felt connected to all of life around me. And this is why I mentioned that I was an atheist prior to this moment. My worldview had no space for this. Like, I literally had no idea how to explain what was happening to me. And yet it was undeniable and so compelling. And it became just a primary focus and interest for me to understand, like, my heart just woke up and is calling me forward. And coming from a really intellectual background, I wanted to know what that meant and what I was tapping into and how to reframe the way that I saw the world in a way that made space for this experience to exist. And that was about a little over 7 years ago now. And what it kind of taught me was that every single part of my experience was coming from inside of me, and that love that I felt expressing through me was actually the truest part of who I was, and was connected to this one interconnected aliveness with all of life that exists on Earth. And the more I aligned to that as reality, the more all of these pieces of what I had learned I was supposed to do and who I learned I was supposed to be really started to fall away. And I actually deconstructed most aspects of the life that I had built for myself up until that time. So I quit my job. I ended up leaving my marriage. I ended up leaving my home. All of this slowly over time, as I really in a deeper way understood that my heart actually was not my intellect. My heart was the best thing about me, and actually the wisest part of me, and my ability to offer love to myself and compassion to myself, and also then all of life that I encounter is the most important work that I can be doing. And so I think it's interesting that you speak about creating this path, because I feel that there's a word in between. Like, we don't find it and we don't create it, but I really, like, my heart has led me on it. Like, it has now become the compass through which I make my choices. And there's a deep listening to self that's required to, yes, make the choices that create the life we want, but also informed by like the truest part of who we are, and the desires that are placed in our heart that are asking to be heard and asking to be seen, and asking to be a part of that path. And so I think it's a little bit of both, like a dance with my choices and what I'm hearing that is being asked of me from this deeper place that I've grown to really cherish over the course of that journey. And it has taken me on every unexpected, like most of the choices I make now in my life, I'm like, would I have thought this 7 years ago? Like, absolutely not. And I think that what I've come to learn is that when I can let go of what I think it's supposed to be and really be open to the mystery, that is where all of the most joyful and incredible and magical aspects of my life have really come from.
I find it very interesting that at the end there, you said, would I have done this 7 years ago? And that number is such an interesting number to bring up in this context. Because, okay, there's so many strings floating through my mind right now, so let me slow down so I can like grasp each one and bring them forward. So one is, for me, almost everything has some sort of mirror expression through our body, in our body. And so all the time, our cells are constantly regenerating, dying and being reborn. And every 7 years, that process completes with your whole body. So it takes 7 years for every cell in your body to die and be reborn. So would you have done this 7 years ago? Probably not, because you were quite literally, physiologically, on a cellular level, a different person. And I experienced a bit of that over the last year. 2024 was 7 years since I went through my divorce and left my marriage. Yeah, it was 2017 when we ended. And I remember very distinctly, things started really unraveling in the summer. And that's when we started going to counseling and all of that. And so last summer, I remember thinking, wow, there is not a single cell in my body that has ever been married. Like, right? Like there's not a single part of me that was that woman. And yet who that woman was and everything that she experienced is still somehow informing this person that I am today, and these cells and how these cells operate, because they came out of the death of the cells of that woman. And so I find it really kind of exhilarating to look back and say, like, oh yeah, that's not even one cell in my body is that woman anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it's interesting that you bring that up, because that was also such like at the beginning when I was in this really, and I love my mind. I love understanding things. Like, I'm still so curious to be able to put things into words, and also love your lens, because it really does speak to some like tangible, practical ways we can do that. But when I first started understanding this, and even like what is choice, right? Like, how much of the time are we just operating from the default of what our cells know and are guiding us towards, like what our unconscious patterning guides us towards, is, how do we start to unwind some of those beliefs and really land in the present moment and choose something different? Because if these last 7 years had included the same conversations, the same kind of behavior, the same eating, the same environment, the same social situations, my cells would be so much closer to who I was back then than they are now, given the choices that I've made to really just honor the fullness of who I am and what my soul is here to do. So I think that also speaks to the place that you're highlighting with that language of like, our choices are creating our story and our reality. And there is, yes, guidance that we can receive from body and heart and soul, and ultimately also free will that we have to make the choices of what direction do we want to move in and who do we want to be. And yeah, just kind of the dance between those two places.
Some of the other strands that were pulling me on that 7. So 7 is a number of mastery, as well as it's got this dual energy of mastery and, I'll say, clearing out. And if you, Anna and I are both in a wealth mastermind where we have a community of people that are giving us new ways of looking at the world all the time. And from a historical view of the traditional Christian Bible and the Old Testament, the traditional Jewish Bible, 7 is a big number, because from the law that is there, every 7 years, your debts were cleared. The people's debts were cleared every 7 years. So if you had entered into a contract of servitude, it was for 7 years. Like, if whatever those contracts were, 7 played an important role at the end of, this is done. Now that's cleared away. So that also comes up for me as we talk about, like, exactly what you said. If I had made those same choices, I would not be necessarily the person that I am now, the different person that I am now. And I think there's something to this educational experience of 7 years that we all go through different periods. And even I've heard this from a few different perspectives, but there's this idea that men don't fully step into their, like, if we look at the royal court as archetypes, even in tarot You know, you have the knight or the page, the knight, the prince, and then the king. And you have that same form, basically archetypal structure for the feminine as well. And for the masculine, they don't really step into that king archetype until 42 years old, which is a 7 year, right? It's moving into the 7th of 7 years that you will be living. So I really find it fascinating that you went there. And I'm curious if you could give a snapshot as to, so you told us that you were married, you were working a 9-to-5 job, you had a house. Who was Anna internally during that time versus how you feel yourself to be now?
Such an interesting question. And I think about this a lot because in some ways I'm more myself than I have ever been. And that has stayed consistent. The part of me that is just like really true to my essence. I think what has changed the most is, I kind of shared leading up to that moment that I had just internalized a lot of ideas of what reality was, a lot of rules about how to live a good life and how to be a good person. And so I was just much more rigidly ruled by those narratives in my mind. And that looked like a lot of self-criticism, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of anxiety, a lot of just stifling my voice and my expression, making myself really small, being much more insecure. And I don't even think that most people would have described me that way. Like, I wasn't meek. I wasn't like, visually any of those things, but pretty constantly in my mind, like always with a story in my mind, which is like moving really fast, which is more emotionally turbulent, which is also, again, I think a place where I couldn't at the time even hear my own voice or my own wisdom. And so that opening of heart, I think, was the first moment in a much longer journey of, okay, you're going to hear it really loud. and then you're going to learn how to listen, and you're going to learn how to meet all of the really difficult emotional experiences and really difficult mental narratives that keep you stuck in these patterns, that keep you choosing things that aren't really a yes, that keep you afraid to speak your voice, afraid to express in your body in a way that feels really good. And slowly over time, and this conversation is so relevant to the one that we had recently about being rooted, like slowly over time, I have nurtured a relationship with myself, nurtured a relationship with my inner voice, with my body, with my emotions that have landed me in just a lot more stillness and confidence and peace in my body. And that changes the way that I feel about myself and in myself on a moment to moment basis, but also the way that I move through the world, the level of peace I can feel no matter what the external situations of life are throwing at me, the level of openness and compassion that I can have in my relationships, regardless of what is coming at me from them, the healthfulness in my emotional boundaries, so that I mentioned I'm a naturally really empathic human. And for a lot of my life, that was a strength that manifested as a weakness, in the sense that like I didn't know how to wield that tool well. And so instead I was just constantly tuned into and hyper vigilant about the environment around me and everybody else's emotional well-being, and how do I fix it, and how do I make sure everyone else is okay, instead of how do I cultivate an inner environment where I'm okay. And then I can meet you in your experience. I can feel you in your experience. I can bring compassion, but I'm not taking it on as my own. And even just having a solid recognition of what the boundary is between my own energy, my own emotions, my own thoughts and values, and the rest of the world, so that, for a long, long time, like, I felt like I was walking around the world, like, really protecting myself from everything that was always coming at me and getting inside. And now, as I've cultivated just being who I am in my own way, authentically as me, it's like I can actually offer a piece of myself to the world. And I do that generously and joyfully, instead of feeling that like need to put up walls and armor and protection from everything that might harm me. Yeah, it just feels better. And I think there's an important caveat to that too, because again, we talked a little bit about this last week on the Rooted roundtable. But that was not in search of joy. Like, everything feeling better didn't happen because I was like, I only want to feel good. That actually happened because I was willing to start to touch and land in and feel through the experiences that really didn't feel good. And the more I have developed the capacity to feel the full spectrum of my emotional and physical experience, the more all aspects of life actually do feel good. Like, the less I resist the things that are hard, the more I can even find beauty in those things when they do come, because we're all human living lives, like, they come. So
yeah. What that brings up for me is, so I often will talk to clients who are just starting to work with me, whether it's coaching or lymphatic drainage or energy work, whatever it is. They're at the point, usually when they first come, they're at the point where they know something needs to change, and they're usually willing to at least look at options that they weren't willing to look at before, because nothing else has worked. And they're coming from this place usually of, the goal is me feeling better, me feeling happy, me feeling lit up by my life. And I want them to feel all of those things, and they will. And what I usually say right around that point is, this way of living, this intentional way of really living from your heart, from your truth. You can call it a conscious way of living, you can call it spiritual way, however you want to phrase it. To me, intention is a pretty level way that all of us can grab onto. It's not necessarily going to make you happy. Like, you will have, I think, greater capacity to experience happiness. But the point of this, and what will actually end up happening, is that you are more able to be with yourself in all of the seasons of life, in all of the moments of life. And sometimes, oftentimes, when you're moving through this process, especially in the beginning, of unlearning all of the patterns and the belief systems and the stories that have led you to living in this way, there's a lot of pain that's involved in seeing all of that for what it is and unwinding that. It is not necessarily a comfortable process. It can be really uncomfortable and sometimes really dark. And I don't think people are prepared for that. They might go have an ayahuasca experience, or they might, have a mushroom medicine ceremony, and they think at the end of it, I'm cured, I'm good, everything. And then the next week, they're back in their regular life, and all of a sudden they're starting to see why they've created the life that they've created, why they've made the choices that they've made, and that it isn't simply a one-time experience of something different that will change all of that. There's actually a sitting with and going deep into that uncomfortable, unclear, murky, sticky place. And that's necessary. It doesn't mean that this doesn't work. It doesn't mean that you made the wrong choice in seeking your heart. It means that your heart is showing you what you're actually ready to see now. And I wanted to make sure that we expressed that, because I think sometimes people hear about different ways of connecting to a more authentic, intentional life, and they assume that it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows. And I don't want to add to anyone's experience of frustration or disappointment if that is not how it feels as you're moving through this process.
Yeah. Thank you for naming that. I find it to be a really important nuance. And again, coming to spiritual community from a maybe less typical route, what I found was that there is almost this escapist mentality disguised as spirituality, of this, like, everything is love and light and everything is just like rising into feeling amazing all the time. And I'm like, majority of my spiritual journey has been through grief, like deep, deep grief. And what I've come to realize is, that was me, the person that you're describing, that just wanted to feel better. Like, why don't I feel good in my life? I have everything around me that I thought I wanted, that things that are genuinely amazing, and I don't feel good, like deeply don't feel good. And what I've come to realize is, like, we cannot selectively numb. And if we are avoiding our pain, we are avoiding our joy. They are two sides of the same coin. And so anybody who is choosing to step onto this journey, and I really do think that, I talk a lot about heart, and courage lives in heart. Like, it isn't just an easeful, oh, I just feel so loving all the time. Like, that is not the reality. It requires courage, and it requires willingness to feel through, as you said, some really deeply uncomfortable truths about, ways that society on a macro level really disconnects us from the truth of who we are. And then all the way down to the places where we ourselves self-abandon because how we feel or what we think or what we want goes against what we're told that we should think or feel or want. And that's hard to weather, that cognitive dissonance, and to be willing to choose something deeper than the beliefs that we've been taught. I just have so much respect for anybody who's endeavoring to take a look at that earnestly and really choose to be more themselves as a compass for their life. And I guess one last thing I want to say about that is I think the other flaw, quote unquote, maybe not quite the right word, that I see in a lot of ways that these kind of spiritual wisdoms are perpetuated, is that then we become really obsessed with ourselves, and ultimately becoming connected to the truth of who we are, I think also is inherently synonymous with becoming connected to the spiritual aspect of who we are, which is interconnected with everything and cannot be separated. And the more we can take a seat in that place, the more we can compassionately hold our individual human experience so that we can show up with more compassion for all of life, not just for ourselves or for the people we love, but all of humanity, all of Earth, all of it.
I really agree with that. And perhaps a slightly different path to this perspective is, at least online. If you had no idea about indigenous practices around the world, if you were somehow raised in a complete Western bubble and have only seen what Western images in social media and on TV and all of that provide, then you may get the idea, as you were speaking to, that connected living, spiritual living, is all about you, all about your journey. And it's, for me, it seems inherently tied to that process seems inherently tied to a colonial mentality view of spirit, and as opposed to what feels to me to be more evident, even from a science perspective, that we are actually all connected. And so any work that I'm doing, if I'm not also holding what is happening to my brothers and sisters around me in the world, it's not quite, there's more. I'll just say there's more to step into. Because if it ends with you, there's so much that you're still missing, right? There's when we're sitting in prayer and you want to do your full moon ceremony, beautiful, do it. Like clear out all of the things, all of the stories, write them down, burn them on a piece of paper, and then maybe write down something that the world in general is sitting with in this moment. Or maybe you're spending time in prayer for people you've never met, but you know you're connected to. Like that's ultimately where we want to move into, is that this isn't only about us. And that's leading me to something else that I wanted to ask you about, which is your ability to heal yourself and heal others through your words, through your writing, is beautiful and profound. And I know from personal experience what a gift it is to express something that's coming up inside of you, and then somehow these words that you put down affect someone else in a meaningful way. And like, wow, how did that happen? That is so freaking cool. And I'm curious if that type of writing, this is my assumption, I assume you were always a talented writer from an academic perspective, right? I would imagine, knowing who you are, that you had skill in writing research papers, that you had skill in correct grammatical writing. Were you as connected to creative, artistic expression in your writing before your heart cracking open? Or was that something that developed afterwards?
I would definitely say it's something that developed afterwards, and not just through writing. Like what you just spoke to in general about creativity, what I've found is that I'll speak just to my own personal experience, but I do think it's also speaking to a larger experience, if I'm being honest. Being raised in a way that really prioritized intellectual achievement and success in a very academic setting diminished creative impulse for me. Like I learned how to do well based on what was expected of me. That was a lot of the lens in terms of how I wrote, how I moved through life. Like, oh, these are the rules. This is what's being asked. I'm going to deliver. Not so much on what is the truth of my heart and how would I express if it's just for me? And, questions that as I say them sound a little more flowery or potentially irrelevant. But what I've, again, come to land in as a deeper truth for me as I've gone through this 7-year period of integration from that moment of heart opening is I really honor that as human beings, we are children of the earth. We're taught to feel separate from wildness because human civilization has built a lot of things that keep us separate from the natural world. And yet, undeniably, whether you approach it from a spiritual or scientific lens, like we're made of the earth, we're connected, we are animated by what animates all life on earth. And when you look at life that way, nature can be such an incredible mirror for parts of who we are. And nature is so abundantly creative, like so creative in the most magnificent ways. And it's funny, actually, that you ask about writing, because when I was in that moment of angst, even before my spiritual awakening, I turned to a writing practice. And I've gone back over the recent years and have like looked at those first journal prompts. And I wrote this, the first thing I ever wrote in there was basically like, I'm going to write my way into a new life. But even then it was like, today is Thursday and there's a peach on the counter. Like it was just, random. It was also some more like internal exploration, but it wasn't profound by any means. And somewhere along the way, as I continued to simply show up, the voice that I was writing in began to change. And I actually really distinctly remember it was shortly after I had COVID. And it really took me out for like 2 weeks. And I was in Northern California at the time. And it was when I felt better and I was continuing on my travels. I was driving through this redwood forest. And these words just landed in my brain. And just like the same phrase over and over again was just like rattling inside my head. And I was like, I need to pull over and write this down. And so I just like pulled over at the side of the road and I sat on a little picnic bench and I wrote a poem. And I was like, would never have thought of myself as a poet before. And yet, like, the words came through me. And I think as I have continued to prioritize creative expression, because I do think that it's an important part of who we all are, not even necessarily just as writer or musician or artist or all of these ways that we typically think of as creative, but just literally in the act of creating anything. I've allowed my mind to control less what comes through and just let it be whatever comes through without making sense. And I've actually found I don't even think I can fully take credit for it. It's coming from somewhere through me. And sometimes it's really delightful to just look down at what happened and be like, oh, I kind of like that. So that's a lot of how my creative journey has unfolded, and really, really highly recommend, whether it's a writing practice or an artistic practice or even just singing or moving our bodies as a way to, if we're on this spiritual journey, right, we're accessing ways of feeling and being that are beyond language. They just are. And so finding some way to pull those threads through our humanness into this material world, I think, is one of the kind of most fun and rewarding things once we get out of the way of the mind that tells us it's stupid or not worthwhile.
It's so true. I have found writing to be my way out since I was a child. And because I was recognized for my writing early on, it became a very academic thing. It was expected of me to write. And I could write well. And give me an essay question, A+. Like, not even I don't even have to study. It's fine. I'll get it. And it took actually preparing to be done with academia. My senior year of college, I was an English major, and I knew I was going to have to write my thesis. And it seemed like, oh yeah, English research paper. And then I was just scanning and I saw that there was an option to do a creative writing project. And I had not taken a single creative writing class in college. But I begged the person who's in charge of the English department, please let me write a creative piece for my thesis. And they did. And it felt so good. And it was this bridge of, yeah, this is what I should be writing. It feels good. There's stuff I want to say. And how magical is it that something's here and then all of a sudden words that I didn't even feel like I put together are on a page in front of me, and I'll read it back and I'll be like, did I write that? That's pretty damn good. That was me. And it wasn't me. It was the creative forces coming through me and me allowing myself to be open enough for that to happen. And it's that part that I really connect to in what you're saying, that it's not me. It is a willingness to be an open vessel. And the reason that I know still to this day that it's not me is listeners of and watchers of the podcast know at the end of every show I have our moment of flow, which is I record a poem that I've written. Usually this week it's going to be one that you wrote, which I'm very excited about. But I'm usually reciting a poem that I've written, and most of the time, I would say about 50% of the time, it's not one that was written prior. It's like, oh, I need to provide a moment of flow, okay? And I'm sitting, and then it just comes through. Like, I don't even know it just comes through. And it's at this point now where that's all I have to do is sit and be with my pen or with my hands on the keyboard, and that's it. Just sit and say, okay, I'm open. And suddenly stuff comes through, and the poem's done in 5 minutes. It is very rare that I go back and rewrite things. I mean, I edit occasionally and I might change 1 or 2 words, but for the most part, how it comes out is how it stays. And that might be my favorite part of all of this. Like, just the ability to be open and see, wow, look at that. Look at what comes through. Life is so fucking cool. Like, that wasn't me. That just happened. It's so fucking cool. And I'm curious if that sense of playful wonder is still present for you in your expressions of creativity.
I'd say it's the reverse. I never used to have that, again, because I had a mentality that I was not creative. I was able to do assignments like you described, but creativity was for other people. I didn't identify with that. And in my adult life, coming to these practices of writing and now singing and playing guitar and just expressing in more creative ways, it's my joy and delight that has led me there. Like, I love those things so much, and so I allow that to inform what I do more of. And I would say even beyond creativity, that's a big part of how I define and practically orient towards this path of heart of, like, there's any choice I make, I get information. I get feedback of, does this expand me and delight me and bring me joy, or does this drain my energy, or, what is the feeling I get from these things? And that's what's drawn me more and more into the world of poetry and writing and song and music. And I guess the only other thing I want to say about that is, the experience that you described of being open enough to receive the wisdom coming through for somebody who's maybe more still in the workings of their mind, or in an earlier stage of learning to listen, or have openness inside of them to not just hear the stories of the mind, which are so easily the loudest a lot of the time. it might not always feel that delightful, or it might not always feel that easeful or magical at first, right? Like it's a practice like anything, and the more that we show up to it, the more these new layers and dimensions of the experience are going to reveal themselves to us. And so if anyone's like, that's not my experience, I just want to say, don't give up, because I really do feel that, a big part of what drives me to continue on this path, separate of the fact that it just feels good and I want to feel good in my life, is I think there's a greater importance for all of us, for humanity, for our communities, for the earth, that we are creating what comes in the future. If we just leave it up to the systems at play, like, let's be honest, we're not going in a really great direction. And so I think our creativity as humans plays a really, really important role for what can be possible in the future, and learning to just be playful with it again and to trust it again. I think that's a really important part of everybody's journey in a different way, depending where we came from. But it's been a real reclamation for me around, like, actually, we're all always creating. The stories in our mind, our perceptions of life, the actions we choose. Like, why not make it really awesome?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It I will that was so perfect, and I don't want to add anything to it. I'm simply it's calling some other things. So I remember, this must have been maybe 10, 11 years ago. I read this book called, there's two books by Dr. Norman Deutsch, The Brain's Way of Healing and The Brain That Changes Itself. And it's a scientific, medical, incredible, it's just amazing. These two books are really talking about the science of neuroplasticity and how what that means is actually miraculous. There were stories of people who were blind since birth, and then by putting something on their tongue to stimulate a different sensory response in their brain, they could see, right? Like, all of these things. And it made me realize, okay, so it really doesn't take any more energy out of me physically to speak and live in a complaining negative state versus to see things with the question of, and now what? What's next? What do I do with this? How do I? And I remember sitting with that and being like, wow, it really is just about taking a moment to choose which way. I have both options available to me. They both really expend the same amount of energy. This one might feel like choosing the more curious approach might feel like it takes more energy right now because it's not something that I'm used to. But in reality, it's a neuron firing this way or a neuron firing that way. Like, it's not really any more work one way or the other. It's my perception of what it's going to cost. It's my perception of how hard it's going to be. And so that's what came up for me in what you were saying. And I want to let everyone know that if you've been sparked, if your curiosity has been sparked by this conversation, I highly recommend signing up for the Rooted Summit, which is actually now, I will make this announcement here, it's going to go on forever. You can go online and still go to rootedsummit.love, and you are still able to sign up and access all of the workshops that each of us did, as well as the roundtable. And we chose to leave it up because we're just so proud of what this container is and how powerful it is, and we want people to have access to it for free forever. So if you're one of those people who hasn't accessed it yet, when you do and you get to Anna's workshop, I really encourage you to take all of the time with it, because the combination of rooting into yourself with tea and the way that you brought us into that space, and then that being in that space leading into journal prompts is so powerful. It's really powerful, and I want everybody to experience it. The other thing that I want to make sure that I let everybody know is that Anna is so brilliant and creative and magical that she has a book of poetry out right now that you can buy and be fed by her wisdom and her openness and her words. So I will have the link where you can buy that in the show notes. Want to make sure that we support Anna and also get what we need, because there's medicine in her words. So I highly recommend that everybody pick up a copy of Anna's book. And before we wrap up, and I just wanted to ask if there's anything that's coming through right now as a message for whoever might be in this collective, whoever might be listening.
Yeah, I guess what I would just want to share with anybody who's in this exploration is you are the wisest person in the room, always. And it's so easy to listen to conversations or people who maybe have taken a different path or might be slightly further along the path, or who just have a different perspective and kind of set ourselves into like a should or some kind of shame around what we're not doing. And I just really want to invite anyone and everyone to really, really deeply trust what is whispering to you from within. Like, take any part of this conversation that resonated and please leave behind the rest, because there are so many different ways to ultimately land in the truth of what we're speaking to. We've taken very different paths, and some overlap and some not. And I think learning to have compassion for your own experience and really honor and value your experience is a really, really, really important part of that journey. So just want to offer that. And that's not to say either that people and guides and wisdom can't also be deeply supportive and resonant. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chloe, for this conversation and just for this continued dialogue and collaboration. I really, really appreciate you and all that you're doing. And thank you to anybody who felt called to listen and be in the space with us.
Yes, Anna. That was perfect. Queridas, we made it to one of my favorite parts of each episode, the moment of flow. I love poetry. I love words and rhythm, and how when you mix the two, you get into a beautiful state of flow. And so I want to leave you with that at the end of each episode. So here it is, your moment of flow. This week's moment of flow is by our guest, Anna Robinson. One day you will choose yourself, and that will be the beginning. One day you will care more about what you want for your one precious life than you do about what other people think of you. One day you will let the truth that's been building inside of you tumble from your lips. One day you will embrace small, imperfect steps towards your dreams. One day you will know peace, not because the world changes, but because you change. And you will rest your head at night, proud of who you've become. One day could be this day, or any day you choose. The knowing that you are not just worth it, you are it.